Hey everyone, welcome to another Dapr community call. This is number 110. It's September 4th, 2024. My name is Mark Duiker. I'm one of the Dapr community managers, and let's get started. So today on the agenda we have Yaron Schneider sharing bits of the Dapr 115 planning. We have Bilgin Ibriam talking about local development with Dapr and Skaffold. I'm doing a quick Dapr Day update that's happening on October 16th. And as usual, we have the community show and tell where we share all of the blog posts, videos, and social messages out there about Dapr. So I'm adding Yaron now to the stage. Yaron, welcome. And the floor is yours. Please tell something about Dapr 115.
Of course, yeah. Happy to be here. Let me share my screen and I can go over the GitHub issue.
Right. Oh, yeah. And just for the audience, if you have questions for Yaron or for Bilgin later, please write them in the chat, in the comments on YouTube, and we will answer them later.
All right. Let me know when you can see it.
Yep, it's there. Yeah, maybe zoom in just one pinch. Yep, perfect.
Yep. All right, cool. So we have shipped Dapr 114, awesome release, so many new features, new performance improvements, and we are now starting the feature definition stage of 115. So in case you are watching this and you want to know what's going to be included in 115 or you have feedback, know that you can go to the Dapr repository, click on issues here at the top left, and then you will see the V115 release planning here on the right. So let's walk through some things that this release is going to contain. First of all, we have a link to the tracking board. Here you can see the items that are basically triaged to the release and how they're progressing. We have Mikey from the community as the release lead, again, done an excellent job on Dapr 114, and he's back at it again for 115. Thank you, Mike. Release lead shadow, that is a role where anyone from the community can actually attach themselves to the release lead and then basically learn, everything there is to know about how to drive a Dapr release. And then you can become a release lead yourself. So if there's anyone who would like to take on that role and it doesn't really come with a lot of responsibility as a shadow, just means you need to participate in the release meeting, just pay attention to stuff that happens, then please let us know. I think it's a really, really good experience for anyone who wants to get involved in an open source community, because the release lead is a pretty common role across many projects. Here we have our perf test lead, who is basically in charge of making sure that performance tests are occurring and that they're sufficient and that we don't have any performance regressions, because performance is a very big part of Dapr. This is going to be done by Cassie here. Long haul tests is done by Elena, this release. Long haul tests are basically there to ensure that every release we have of Dapr undergoes, continuous delivery into an environment that runs simple applications that utilize most of the Dapr building blocks. And we watch these metrics over time to make sure that, there aren't any issues in Dapr that compound over time. The build manager is Josh, a Dapr maintainer. This to make sure that, our test and build processes are advancing and that there's no issues with them, that CI/CD pipelines are all good. If you want to read more about Dapr release lifecycle, there is a link here. So what are the milestone dates? These are important to remember dates. The feature definition phase started in August 27th. This means that during this point, we can triage items. We can decide what's important to go into the release. This phase ends in September 10th. We can still get code in before September 10th, but it just means that after September 10th, we will not be accepting major issues into the project. Small features, incremental, improvements, they can still go in. Feature freeze, we don't have a date for that yet. This is basically when we do not accept code for features anymore. Code freeze is generally, any type of code going into the project except for bug fixes and security fixes. Release candidate release day. This is when we release the release candidate. This is a very volatile and fluid date that kind of tends to move around. Release day, still don't have a specific date, but we're kind of, aiming at early mid-November. And then the announcement day usually happens a day after the release day. And the priorities for this release are the following. I would say that the major one here is getting workflows to become stable. Workflows is a major building block in Dapr. A lot of excitement over this. We already know about users who have taken it into production in its beta state right now. And we want to make sure that this is a building block that can serve the highest scale possible, and it has all of the benefits for Dapr for security and reliability. And so we're going to be investing a lot of work during these 2 months. This is a shorter release cycle in making workflows stable. This is, I would even say that the P-1, if there was such a thing, this is the most important thing for the release. Another new API that we will be accepting is the Conversation API. This is an API to basically help developers deal with the complexity of talking to different LLM models. So in case you've been wondering what Dapr is going to do about AI development or AI engineering, then this is the first step. Thank you to Intel for bringing up the proposal and driving the work. This is being worked on mostly by Longday, another Dapr core maintainer, and this is going to be very interesting because this is going to allow for LangChain type of capabilities to really be able to make different LLM models, not within the necessarily Python or Clang driver side of things, be more accessible to developers running in any language. And then you will also be able to, of course, use Dapr circuit breakers, timeouts, retries, authentication mechanisms, telemetry, and tracing to make Dapr the best possible mechanism to invoke these underlying LLMs. So this is a very interesting direction, and certainly the first step Dapr is taking in regards to conversational AI anyway. Third issue here is test stabilization in the Dapr runtime. As we bring on more APIs and turning existing ones into stable, we want to make sure that we can release fast, because sometimes we need to patch the project. We actually have a 1.14.2 release coming out today or tomorrow, and we want to make sure that our test infrastructure is as stable as possible, because if it isn't, it just delays the release, which delays it getting into the hands of our end users, which is not preferable. Another P0 is to get support for the bidirectional subscription mechanism that we put into Dapr 114 to the .NET and Java SDKs. There are actually PRs out for both now. This morning, a community contributor named Whitwaldo, thank you Whit, opened the PR in the .NET SDK for streaming subscriptions. Greatly appreciated. We also have a community contribution for the Java SDK, which is amazing. So yeah, thank you for that. This is pretty great. Java is incoming. I don't think it's there already, but it's going to be there soon. So there is one for .NET, and of course it's also implemented inside of the Go SDK. So once .NET is in, we will have Go and .NET. We might even release a patch SDK version for the .NET SDK, just so that .NET users will not have to write their own gRPC clients, but they will be able to use the SDK natively. We will be updating around that. P0, another one is HTTP status code config from resiliency, a common ask from people who are using Dapr resiliency policies, circuit breakers, retries, timeouts, is to be able to retry, for example, based on an HTTP status code that the target service is returning. So, let's imagine you have Dapr service invocation from service A to service B, and you only want to retry or consider the outgoing call and error if the status code is 405, for example. And then we have another one that, by the way, we're going to link to all of these issues here, which is improving error codes and metrics. Metrics are very important. As developers, sometimes we don't rely on them too much, but the platform teams, the engineering teams, the infrastructure teams, they rely on them a lot. And so it's very important that we surface up error codes that are important, so that people can put alerts in place in case any part of Dapr, whether it's a control plane component or a data plane component, errors out. So this is basically just going to revamp that in Dapr. A P1 that we have is not actually code related. This is not going to make its way into Dapr for 115, so I just want to be clear about that. This is about arriving at a community consensus for what listing keys inside of the state API would look like, so that we can implement that in 116, hopefully. Being able to list and query has been a long-standing community request for the state API, and at the very least, we want to be able to get some sort of design approval for that within the 115 timeframe. So if you are passionate about this subject, please look at our proposal repository, github.com/dapr/proposals. Find the one for document APIs, query APIs, SQL, and the KV list. We will try to reconcile all of them into a single proposal, but please leave your thoughts. End user perspective is extremely important because in the end, you, the end users, are going to be using this. So we as maintainers would like to know what you think is the best way to achieve being able to list keys and query. And of course, we want to arrive at an architecture that allows us to implement this quickly so that we can solve for the most highly sought after use case, even if it doesn't cover everything. If it covers the majority of use cases, that's good enough to start out with. And then another P0, because workflows is becoming stable, the scheduler service that was introduced in Dapr 114 is also going to be made stable, because this is the new infrastructure backbone for actor reminders, which is basically the way to invoke activities in a workflow. And so there's a bunch of work we need to do there, improve metrics, handle namespacing better, make sure that it can scale elastically. And then for people who are using the current existing reminder solution, we want to make sure that there is a data migration path. So we can basically just enable the scheduler service to be the default in 115, and you're not going to lose your existing reminder data. And so all of these items, again, are being tracked inside of this release tracking board. And this is a list of issues here that will be moved to 116. This will start to get filled out as the release progresses, because there's just going to be stuff that we're not going to be able to do for 115. It's always like that. And so these are the individual milestones inside of the different SDKs that have their own independent release cycles. Okay, so we're releasing the CLI and components contrib independently, and of course, all of the SDKs. One benefit that the SDKs have is that they can release new patch versions, new minor versions independently of the Dapr CLI. So for example, if we add a new API support for example, the .NET SDK for the Jobs API or for the Streaming API, we can actually release the SDK before Dapr 115 comes out. So yeah, I guess this is everything. If you think something should be on the release from an end user point of view, we would love to hear about it. If there's something that's near and dear to your heart, please comment on this issue or reach out to maintainers on Discord. That's all. I'm going to stop sharing now. Back to you, Mark.
Yes, thanks a lot, Yaron. And I guess this is also a call for, like, if people want to contribute, right, to any of these features, they can also make themselves known, right, in the comments of this of this issue. So
we are always gladly accepting PRs.
Exactly. Yeah. And if people are want to also contribute to one of the other SDKs, so maybe the .NET SDK was already done by Witwaldo, Java's being looked into, but maybe you want to help to contribute to the JavaScript SDK, maybe for like the was it the scheduler, or was it the which API was it for contributions?
Well, we have the Jobs API that's awaiting contributions to add to more languages, and also streaming subscriptions.
Oh yes, that was stream subscriptions.
I just want to call out, if there's anyone who's passionate about JavaScript, we're looking for JavaScript maintainers. Please talk to me. If you want to become a maintainer of a highly adopted and highly successful CNCF project, we are now looking to onboard new maintainers. So JavaScript is certainly an SDK that is very highly downloaded. We're getting, I think, close to 8,000 downloads for JavaScript per week.
Per week, exactly.
Yes, per week. And so it's very important that we enable these new APIs in the JavaScript SDK too. That
was a good shout out, Yaron. Thank you. Perfect.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And let's move on. Next, we have Bilgin talking about local development with Dapr and Skaffold. So let me add Bilgin to the stage. Welcome, Bilgin.
Thanks, Mark. Can you see my screen?
I still need to add it. Here we go. Yep, we're all good.
Okay. Recently, I've been doing some work around local development with Dapr, and I want to share a simple project I created and how I use that with Skaffold, which I think is a really great complement to Dapr. So software development would say cloud native development probably can be divided in two phases at high level. Local development, which is known as inner development loop, where you iterate quickly, like you write some code, build, maybe run and test it. The whole idea is all these interactions are within your local machine. They don't leave your machine, and you can iterate quickly. But at some point, once you're happy with that, you would do, git push and trigger the build pipeline, where things are a bit more slower and more checks are performed. Like you build a container image, maybe you're deploying that application to Kubernetes and run integration tests, performance tests, perform static code analysis, and all that is known as the auto developer loop, right? But if we drill into inner development loop more, and specifically in the context of Dapr, right? I was looking how an optimal development can be done. Now, keep in mind, Dapr is used by different languages and frameworks, so probably this varies. In my case, I tried that with in Java using Spring Boot, and you can see here the URL to GitHub project, which you'll see in a minute. I would say that it's not a single loop, but there are different concentric loops, right? Maybe you start with a project, like in Spring Boot, you start a project structure, you can write your controller, write some code. In the Java world, unit tests are quite popular. You can unit test that by mocking the Dapr SDK, for example, if you're using that, and add some functionality. At some point, you would build your Spring Boot app, start the Uberjar, and use the Dapr CLI to run the app and the sidecar with the default components, interact with your app until you are happy, and keep iterating and adding functionality. And I would say somewhere here, you probably, especially if you're deploying into Kubernetes, you want to try to deploy into Kubernetes. And in my case, for that, I used Minikube or Kind to use both, and I used Skaffold here to deploy into Minikube and Conductor, the product I'm working on to get visibility into the Dapr deployment. And some of the reasons why you may want to do that. So if you are deploying into, if the production target is Kubernetes, locally, you can quickly validate some of the, the contract between Dapr and Kubernetes. Things such as if you're using a Kubernetes config file, that will be like an application config. You can validate that properly matches. If you're using, health checks, whether these are Kubernetes health checks, app health checks, you can validate those. If you're using some volume mounts, you can verify that's working properly. If you're referencing secrets from Kubernetes, you can validate that you're getting the right secret, the right key from that secret, whether the tokens, whether these application or sidecar tokens are passed, et cetera, et cetera. So validating those and iterating quickly locally is faster than checking in and trying to fix that in a shared environment, is what I'm getting at. So let's see what that project looks like. The project is on GitHub. It's using Minikube and Skaffold. So the reason I picked Skaffold is I did try a few projects that can help you deploy into Kubernetes, including the Dapr CLI with multi-app run, right? Thing which I found few limitations that Skaffold overcomes. But in case of Skaffold, the installation is this easy. There is no other dependencies. It's yes, it's a single binary in your local machine, and it works perfectly with Minikube and Kind, where you can build container images and deploy them locally without going to a container registry on the internet. In this case, the example it's the publisher subscriber quick start, right? Two apps that are using Redis as a pub-sub. So install a single replica Redis instance. So for the rest, let's see quickly the code and what Skaffold does. I will not explain everything here, as this is the very first example. People start with Dapr. The publisher is a standard Java publisher that publishes to the orders topic. For build, I'm using a Docker file, as there are other ways to build containers in Skaffold, like zip for Java, git for Go, etc. In this case, I'm using Dockerfile, which works with any language, really. And let's go to the Skaffold file. So this the idea is each microservice has its own Skaffold file. In this case, I'm using a specific build strategy that detects changes locally. That's I'm just saying, wrap this in using the Docker file in this image. In addition, I can tell what additional Kubernetes resources to deploy. Here in the deploy folder, you'll see my deployment file for this app with a sidecar. There is a service to expose it. In addition, this service has some common dependencies. That's the component definition that this service and the subscriber depends on. So if I look into common, there is the standard component file for pops up. Okay. Once the image is built, I'm telling how to deploy into Kubernetes. I think these lines basically say use kubectl to deploy. And I can also tell what will be the log formats. I'm saying JSON and pick these fields. And also what ports to expose. So I'm exposing specific ports from Minikube to my local machine. Right, with all that, let's see. This is my project. If I go to the publisher, I can do Maven clean install, skip test. I have unit tests, by the way, as shown on the very inner loop, and then Skaffold dev. What this command does is it's a basic wrapper command that performs a number of things. So it will use my source code, the Docker file, the Kubernetes resources I showed. It will build the image and apply them into Minikube. You could just run the subcommands like build or just run or deploy, but this is kind of doing all of that. In this case, you see very quickly it deployed everything. Let's try that. I have a test file. I can publish a message here, and I should see that in the logs. So in addition to deploying, it also started port forwarding and streaming the logs. Similarly to Dapr multi-app run, but with port forwarding. Now, the cool thing is if I'm iterating something and here, I could go and change the Java code, order published, let's call it live. For this to be detected, I need to build the jar file. Okay, where am I in the publisher? So if I do Maven clean install, you will see that once the jar file is built, because that jar file is dependency declared in the Docker file, it found that change, and it is redeploying and making sure and starting port forwarding and everything. So if I run the test again, in the log, I should see the change. So you can quickly change the code. The thing more interesting is if you want to change some of the Kubernetes files, right? For example, I can change this deployment file and experiment with various Dapr annotations. I can remove these two logging annotations, and it quickly again detected the change that this is dependency of the service, and it's redeploying. And I think the changes are in. If I hit the endpoint, I think what we are getting as the log entries have changed. Now, moving on, rather than running this single app, by the way, if you stop, it will undeploy all apps and dependencies. So it cleans up of itself. I can go level up, right, at the project level. And look, here I have another Skaffold file, just refers the publisher and subscriber, the bot microservices. So I can, at this level, upper level, I can do Skaffold dev, and this will deploy, in this case, both the publisher and subscriber. Subscriber has its own Skaffold file, which is very similar to the publisher with different port numbers. Here, I did hard code the port numbers in this. If you don't specify, they will be dynamically allocated, so you don't have to do all of this. I did that so that I have fixed port numbers for some of these services. So I think at this point, I have both of the services running, and you can see it uses different colors for different services if you have multiple ones, as it's streaming all the logs in the same place. The other thing I have on this Minikube is Conductor, Aggregate Conductor, which is also installed on Minikube. And here, it actually quickly detected that both of these applications are running. You see it detected that I have a PubSub component. There is a subscriber, which in this case is a programmatic one. So you can see both declarative, programmatic, even dynamic subscriptions. And the cool thing is this feature advisor, which will actually analyze what you have deployed. And in this case, it can tell me, for example, my component doesn't have topic scoping, or the component has no scopes defined, my component definition, which is a common dependency of both services here, right? And indeed, there are no scopes. So if I add that change into this common dependency, Skaffold will detect that this common dependency of both services has changed and will redeploy that. Plus, it will redeploy the apps, I believe. So not a Skaffold expert, but I think now in Conductor, I can run the checks again, or I can validate that and see the number of unresolved issues was reduced from 8 to 7. So basically, the idea is Skaffold can give you a really good fast iteration from your local machine into a Kubernetes, and Conductor gives you visibility in what's running and how to make these YAML files even better before you push into centralized pipeline, and where iteration is a bit slower. Let me see what else. So finish up here, I'll leave some links where in Dapr you looked at the various developer tools, right? I have a blog series with using Dapr with Skaffold. And my next step is to add a Dapr documentation page, how to use Dapr and Skaffold. Here we have a few other blog posts about various development tools, Dapr and Spring Boot, Dapr and .NET, Aspire, etc. And lastly, I'm looking for other Dapr developers who are doing development differently or facing challenges. I'm looking to talk to them. So if anyone is willing to chat with me or jump on a call, just ping me on Twitter or on Discord, Dapr Discord, and I will be super interested to see how you do Dapr development.
Cool. Thank you very much, Bilgen. Yeah, it's a good shout out, right? Because it's very interesting to see, because Dapr can be used with so many different technology stacks, and probably each technology stack has a different way of doing local development and doing it with Kubernetes locally or not. So yeah, please need to reach out to Bilgen on Discord if you want to share that information. That's quite valuable. So for me, Skaffold is completely new, right? I mean, you introduced it to me, Bilgen, like a couple of weeks ago. I still haven't finished my my test with it, but yeah, it's definitely like a very useful tool to make like a quick iteration while still doing like local development with Kubernetes, which is normally not a very easy thing to do. But this looked like very, very fast, right? You updated this PubSub YAML file with the scope, and it was like with a matter of like a second, and then it was there. So that sounds pretty cool. Looks pretty cool.
Yeah, it's the fastest way I found to iterate with Kubernetes.
Nice.
If that's part of your workflow, definitely check out Skaffold.
Yeah, I'll need to do it. Cecil is asking, any thoughts on Minikube versus K3D for local development, or maybe any other local Kubernetes?
I use Minikube because I'm more familiar with it, but I also used Kind. I think these two are the most popular development environments. But I haven't tried others. But I had some issues with Docker Desktop in general. But Minikube and Kind are, pretty good. I would say pick the one that you're familiar with and one that works with Dapr and your stack, and stick to that.
Yeah, I think that's also one of the challenges in maybe the cloud native space, right? There are so many flavors of the same kind of tooling. Yeah, it's also quite hard to figure out which one is the right one for me. So yeah, if anyone feels like, okay, I want to do like a comparison with Dapr and all these local Kubernetes distributions, please go ahead.
Yeah, in this blog post, which is comparing Dapr developers tools, we've listed all the tools we are aware. So there is, there is IDE plugins, there is various other tools, and if you know something else that's not listed, again, just ping me. We'll try it and add it there.
Yeah, I think you want to create like an encyclopedia with all kinds of Dapr tools, Bilgin.
I'm open for it. Just waiting for the list to grow.
All right. Okay, there are no further questions. Thanks a lot, Bilgin.
Welcome. Great to be here.
Right, it's time for a quick Dapr Day update. So Dapr Day is happening on October 16th of this year. And let me quickly go here. Here, right. So the schedule is now ready, and you can now register for the event. As you see, you can make an order, but it's a free event. So order now. You don't have to pay anything, but you need to register. So the agenda is here now. I'm not going to list everyone, but we do have like quite amazing keynote speakers. Marko Sinovic is doing the opening keynote, and we have Joe Bida doing the closing keynote, and we have like many amazing sessions in between there. So yeah, please register for this event. Like I mentioned, October 16th. It's on a Wednesday to celebrate 5 years of Dapr. Right. Getting back to the slides. Time for the community show and tell. And even though my name is here, the compilation of all of the blog posts and links and etc. Sometimes I collect them, but very often one of the other community managers, Anu Singh, is compiling them. And this time, he compiled this list. So for the next time, I will also add his name to this community show and tell, because it's not just me gathering all this data. So we have a couple of blog posts, which again, I've already listed here. There's a very interesting one. We have like a new CNCF case study published by What's Water Technologies. Mark Copito is the author of this one. It's really quite detailed, and well, they have like a very positive experience with Dapr. So yeah, the Dapr project is really grateful that this case study is here. They list which APIs they're all using and how they are using it. So they talk about PubSub, servicification, cron binding. They mentioned some other APIs and bindings. And of course, the impact is really very interesting to know, right? So what did it actually result to? And yeah, basically they saved really lots of developers' hours. So they got up really up and running very quickly. So they claimed they have like over 100 development hours saved by using Dapr and the Dapr SDK instead of writing all of that code yourself, which is really amazing to see. Next blog post is a blog post by Srinivasa about microservice architecture using container apps and Dapr and Kida. So this is a nice technical overview about all these services. Then you have quite a high-level overview of Dapr Distributed Architecture's Secret Weapon, which is a nice title, written by Andy. And finally, we have an article talking about Dapr Kida on Azure Red Hat OpenShift. This one is in Portuguese, so for all of the Portuguese readers, go ahead or translate this article. So those are the blog posts that we found. Then Will Valida posted two new videos on YouTube. So he's making like a whole YouTube series on Dapr for like short like informational videos on how to use different Dapr APIs. So recently he released how to use the secret management and the state management. Oh no, I'm not going to play this. All right. Then some social messages we found on LinkedIn and Twitter. So again, mentions of the new CNCF case study that was there, that we published the Dapr Day agenda, some links to the 3 articles that we already shared. There was a reference to a conference where Edwin van Wijk and Sonne Molenkamp gave a session about Dapr, which Paulo found really interesting. And I was on a conference/festival last week in Copenhagen, the Copenhagen Developer Festival. I gave a Dapr session there about Dapr workflow and resiliency. And Luc Duis, one of my former colleagues, gave a session about Radius and then also demonstrated the integration with Dapr there. So that was great to see. So if you are writing a blog post about Dapr, or if you're creating some other content, some videos about Dapr, or if you're doing like conferences or presentations about Dapr, you can claim these badges. So you need to go to the Dapr/community repo, and then there is a blog posts folder or a presentations folder, and it contains a markdown file, and that contains a table with links to either blog posts or links to presentations. So you can add your own blog post or presentation to these tables, and then we will award you with one of these badges. And everyone can claim this Dapr Community Supporter badge. So I think this badge has been claimed over 350 times now. So this badge is for free. It's not an NFT. It's being handed out by the lovely Holopin organization, who hands out digital badges. So feel free to claim this digital badge. You can then share it on socials. You can actually create a virtual board with your badges, and you can include that in your GitHub README profile. So please, I would like to see this. If you claim this, please share it with us. And that was it for today. Let's see if you have other questions. Oh yeah, Cecil in mentioning that Anu does a great job collecting the data for the show and tell. Yes, definitely. And Roberto saying, looking forward to the conversation API. Yeah, this is very new indeed. I'm working on extending workflow activities to include LM-based tasks and agents. Yes. Well, yeah, we need to go. Everyone needs to go to Dapr Day, and then we can actually see the session. Right. So thanks everyone, and hope to see you in 2 weeks for the next one. Bye-bye.